you folk of Yorkshire, come steady on your way. I got one more thing to try and sell you, watch it glistening away. Here comes one big shining beauty, all ready for your eyes. Come gather round on market day, and with a stunning sense of pride, you'll see how scared we've got the foe out there, out trembling with pain. With one shower down from Egbert, they're wanting thunder turned to rain. This is our great campaign now, from November till we've won. So let Abner climb on board now and display the shining gun, and come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. With an open heart and an open mind, and with every penny in the owner's cap, we'll send more shells there and more lads back. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. And the boys and men destroyed there are so different from our own. The lists grow longer in the paper, but less and less is ever known. The lads have had their training, now it's time to back them up. Battalions of soldiers marching onwards, toughen up. And if Egbert doesn't tempt you, then we'll come again next week. We've got one more piece of machinery to show you, and more ways to kill the meat. Will you feed the gun now we've awed you? All battalions can wait. Rule Britannia starts at home now, and we must take all the weight. And come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. With an open heart and an open mind, and with every penny in the owner's cap, we'll set more shells there and more lads back. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. And the trenches must get dug deeper, or now 50 yards apart. A steady base to launch the chaos from, a special form of art. Metal glistens beneath the blazing sun, or mud rots the bloody feet. It's important to move forward now and let them take the heat. So take one thought for your British boy, out there fighting all alone. It's the only way to show you love him now, it's the only way to bring him home. Will you feed the gun now we've awed you, or your family can wait? Rule Britannia starts at home now, and we must take all the weight. And come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. With an open heart and an open mind, and with every penny in the owner's cap, we'll send more shells there and more lads back. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly. Come down to the racecourse and watch it fly.
I'm going to just do a bit of shuffling around in a ladylike manner, as much so as possible. Hello. I'm going to do you a song that I wrote very much directly from one of the titles of one of the exhibitions in the gallery at the museum. And it was a photo of a set of female workers entitled "The Bells of the Brickfield." And these women were working making bricks during the First World War. And the specific exhibition was about women in work, but more directly about the experience of what happened when men came home from war and suddenly the workforce doubled, and there was lots of people looking for jobs, and lots of women hadn't been working before and suddenly were out on their ear. And I started writing this song about the bells of the brickfield, and I thought, oh, it must have been awful, going into a job, coming out of it again. And I realised very quickly that actually the women had been the sole and, well, not sole, but certainly main workers of the brickyards throughout the history of the brickyard. So for 100 plus years, actually, they've been nearly all women workers, especially down in the Midlands. And they had amazing names. There was one central worker who was the queen, and she was the one that got to model the bricks. And then she would have what they called pages, like page boys, but actually they were nearly all girls from the age of 7 upwards who were lugging clay from the pits to this woman who was then modelling bricks, ready to go off to be fired. And there was all of these women working, and they worked through the war, and then the men came back, and even though they'd been there for hundreds of years doing this job, the men needed the work. So even the roles that were women's to begin, it all got a bit tricky. And a few different things crept into this song, including, Greg's like that, poised, including the female football teams. You know, the FA banned professional women's football in 1921, and it wasn't reinstated as a professional sport for women until the 70s, I think. Is that right? Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not sure.
You're not a football expert, Jude.
But, the First World War was a heyday for women's football, and throughout the project people have brought us lots of photographs of their ancestors who were female footballers, and there's some on our project website. And we've done a lot of work through the project with the Mexborough District Heritage Society, and they've got a fantastic photograph of the women's football team there, and they were heavily linked to the local industries that women worked for during the First World War as well.
Thank you. One of the big teams was the Dick Kerr ladies from Preston, named after the factories that they were working in there. And they played a match at Goodison Park that had over 50,000 spectators at it. That gets mentioned in this song. So, Football Stadium. This is the bells of the brickfield. When the peace bells were rung, when the flag waving finished, when the men came back home, I was out of a job, forced back to domesticity, shunted to poverty. They said a woman's days labouring are over. The Doncaster papers didn't hide their disdain. This was just one more role conquered by the fair sex. But we've been ruling the brickyards for 100 plus years. But now the men need the work, so that's over. But we toiled as hard, and our hours were as long, and our hands are as calloused, our backs beggared and bent. We were Mexborough's finest, the bells of the brickfield. They say a woman's days working are over. There was a queen at the working, each brick carefully crafted, while her pages around fetched and carried the clay, caked from headscarf to boot, gender unrecognizable. And from 7 years old, a girl learnt her life trade. We were sacked or took wage cuts, demoted and shoved out. How they laughed when we said equal work, equal pay. We were cherished when needed, then cussed out like old newspapers. Because a woman in man's work's not welcome. But we toiled as hard, and our hours were as long, and our hands are as calloused, our backs beggared and bent. We were Mexborough's finest, the bells of the brickfield. They They say a woman's day's working all over. They've banned women's football, it's far too unsuitable. We can build ammunition, but we can't kick a ball. Though we had 50-odd thousand spectators at Goodison, it seems a woman's day is sporting all over. So our war isn't done, we're still fighting for change. In 100 years' time, surely sense will prevail. There'll be perfect equality, no pay gap disparity. And the fight for our rights will be over. Because we toil as hard, and our hours are as long, and our hands are as calloused, our backs beggared and bent. We were Maxborough's finest, the bells of the brick field. They say a woman's day's working all over. We were Maxborough's finest, the bells of the brick field. They say a woman's day's working all over.
So the 20-minute club that I mentioned earlier, I didn't realise that aeroplanes were used in the First World War, but they were. They were largely used for, what was the phrase? Observation and reconnaissance. That's what they were largely used for. And then they started holding guns and firing them out the side. And then they worked out that they could strap the guns to the plane. Nobody would have to hold anything. And yeah, they reckon they had about 20 minutes to live if they were lucky after the plane took off, which aren't great odds, are they? And again, just harping back to the specific nature of so much of this, the niche nature, if you like, reading diaries and things like that. And I live in Sheffield, and I adore South Yorkshire. I love walking around it, be it the peaks or towns. So I tried to shoehorn a few places that I've walked around into this song. I dream of walking on my favourite moor again, the one from Wenworth on to Wathen, that's my fare. And I'd do anything that I can now to wake up home in my Yorkshire town. It's not even a hospital when we get home, but some rich bloke and his family turn from gold. But we don't care, wherever we land will be so much better than Jerry's cold hand. And if we get home, well, what awaits us there? A society that's lost its will and lost its heirs. And in the country houses we once knew, like all they will be started anew. Must we really strap new contraptions to these planes? Must we really find new and old ways to maim
don't need war to help the poor. You don't need wounds to do research. Out of all the observing and reconnaissance I've done, all I've seen is that nothing can be won. So why don't we let them keep their Rhineland homes and us go back in trucks to Thorn? Well, I've only got 20 more minutes to live, but I've got 20 years and 20 more to give. How can this be right for all our men to wake up wounded in a hospital bed? 20 minutes.
This is called "It's Made a Different Man of Me," and what was the name of the guy that wrote the letter?
Harry Sharper.
Harry Sharper. Not the nicest man, apparently, and he wrote a letter home, saying how the war had made a different man of him and everything was going to be absolutely fine when he got home. And the letter was in, you showed us the letter in the museum.
Yeah, that's right, and we've actually got it here today for people to have a look at as well.
I basically took his words and set them to music. I guess it's not entirely him. Some of it's just this character I invented in my head of a guy that's like, he's not really telling the truth, but you know, while the bombs are falling, he's going to tell the truth, and when he comes back, he'll try a bit to be a nice guy. But can you?
Yeah, the sad thing about Harry is that he never actually made it home. He wrote this amazing letter of reconciliation to his wife. They'd obviously had some problems in their marriage, and he promised that he'd be a better father to their son Dixon Taylor. He promised to his wife Annie that would happen on his return, and that he would no longer be with old associates, which I think you mentioned in the song. So whether that be other women or drinking companions, we're not sure. But you know, the sad thing is we just don't know whether things would have been different.
So who was the other guy then? Because there's kind of two people in this. There was another guy that came back, and he was a nasty piece of work.
He was the guy who the lady wrote the letters to, and they got engaged because he was all lovely to her. And then it turned out he was having a nice time with quite a lot of ladies, and she smashed up her engagement ring with a hammer.
That's right. That was a Mexborough chap called. His fiance was from Mexborough, and he was a Doncaster man called Reg Bradley, who was a local policeman, and he'd received this letter from Miriam Shaw from Mexborough, who was an usherette at the local cinema. And she had she'd sort of raised some money for a comfort pack to send out to the front and put her picture in it, which he was quite taken with. Put that up on the walls of the dugout, and apparently the other troops had quite admired it as well, and they worked out that they were from the same area. So when he came back on leave, they started courting, got engaged. But yeah, as Bella said, it didn't end too well for Reg the Lothario, and Miriam, quite rightly, smashed the engagement ring up with a hammer.
Hooray!
All of these various rogues and charming chaps. The three of us were alerted to something which apparently historians and archivists have, and I'm quite happy to throw all of them under the bus here. Is that they all have history boyfriends. So pictures of some of these old soldiers. They've each got a history boyfriend that they fancy more than the other. But I'm not making any of it. It's not me that's weird. I'm just recounting the story. Who's your history boyfriend, Jude?
Well, this was a theory that Lindsay, our project researcher, who sadly isn't here to defend herself, had. I'm not sure quite whether I share it or not, but when I was at the National Maritime Museum, there were some dashing explorers that, you know, not that I had them on my bedroom wall, but admired their portraiture in the museum.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4. When this is over, my pet, my lamb, and I come home, my dear wife and my boy, you deserve happiness, my pet, my lamb, my life's objective, my dear wife and my boy. I can see my follies, see what might have been. I can see what's going to be. It's made a different man of me. Sharing our troubles, my pet, my lamb. Church on a Sunday, my dear wife and my boy. We shall all go, my pet, my lamb. You'll be contented, my dear wife and my boy. I can see my follies, see what might have been. I can see what's going to be. It's made a different man of me. An old associate, my pet, my lamb. I've made mistakes, my dear wife and my boy. Each I will rectify, my pet, my lamb. When this is over, my dear wife and my boy, I can see my follies, see what might have been. I can see what's going to be. It's made a different man of me. We never let them alone, my pet, my lamb. Shelled them till Tuesday, my dear wife and my boy. Soon it will all be over, my pet, my lamb. You'll welcome me home, my dear wife and my boy. I can see my follies, see what might have been. I can see what's going to be. It's made a different man of me. It's made a different man of me. Thank you.
We're going to do one more song, and then we're going to give you a little walk-around break. I think the museum part that's open is just in this doorway across the hall, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got our Estates of War exhibition open that you can have a look at, telling the story of Doncaster's country houses at war. And then just in the foyer, we've got some First World War handling objects for you to have a look at, and some of the objects from our own collections that have inspired the songs as well. And there's a song that Greg's doing a bit later on that we've just today been brought some new evidence from of Vic the dog. So you can go and have a look at the picture of Albert John Drury and Vic the dog, who we'll be talking about later. His family are here today, and we're very excited about that. And you can also go and grab a drink from the 1086 Brew House, which is open specially for us. So it's just outside the doors, and then follow it round to your left through to the courtyard.
Lovely. And you could also buy a Findlay Napier CD or a Greg Russell CD.
Or a Bella Hardy vinyl album record.
I knew such a thing was possible.
It's not an album of like this, but you could buy all 3 separate ones and pop them on at the same time. And it sounds absolutely shite.
So do come back after the interval. We have a few more songs to share with you after this. But this one is for one of our favourite characters from the archives, who is a woman called Frida Hooper. Where did Frida Hooper come from in Doncaster? She was Doncaster, wasn't she?
Yeah, that's right. So she was from the centre of Doncaster. From her dad was a master butcher, and she lived above his butcher's shop in St Sepulchre Gate.
Very good. Frida Hooper was a dancer, as the song will tell you. She was an all-round entertainer, really, a variety girl. She would sing, she would dance. And I think it was quite a discovery at the archives. They'd seen kind of her name in a picture, maybe, but thought that there's some stories that didn't quite match up because she wasn't very old. But it turned out Frida Hooper was entertaining around Doncaster, especially during the World War I period, from the age of 14. She started going into the hospitals and cheering everybody up and became absolutely a bit of a local legend from a very early age. And went on really to become a dance teacher between the wars. And then when the Second World War happened, once again she was out entertaining, but she had whole troops of younger girls with her when it came around the second time as well. So I think quite an incredible sounding character, really.
And there's stuff, Frida Hooper stuff?
That's right, yeah, we've got some of the... so this was an amazing discovery from Lindsay, our project researcher, and it's just the sort of story that we love in museums and that only come round, quite infrequently. It was a mystery that Lindsay had solved. So in our King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry collection, which is displayed at Doncaster Museum, we were preparing for one of our Project First World War exhibitions, and we came across a letter that was a letter of thanks signed by many men from the 5th King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry, which was a territorial battalion, and it was made up of lots of Doncaster men. And it was a letter of thanks to a Miss Hooper for the cigarettes that she'd sent them for money that she'd raised from the sale of her photograph. And we were thinking, this is interesting. It must be someone who's obviously quite popular in Doncaster that they would be able to that people would want to buy their photographs. So Lindsay did a bit of digging in the census, and the only kind of person that really fit was this person who was a 14-year-old girl who was living in St Sepulchre Gate, and that didn't seem right. But then Lindsay dug a bit further into the archives, and there were some newspaper articles in the local Doncaster Gazette and Chronicle about a Miss Hooper being an entertainer and entertaining people in the workhouse in Doncaster as well. And then it was only when we borrowed a large collection of objects for the exhibition that we've got on here from Hooton Pagnell Hall, which was an auxiliary hospital during the First World War, from the descendants of the Ward Oldham family that were there in the First World War, that we found a photograph and a business card from Miss Hooper, and she was indeed a young girl, and the address on the business card was the St Sepulchre Gate address that matched. And then, so Lindsay thought, this must be her. And then being the kind of dogged researcher that she is, she's now, she was the project researcher, and she's now gone on to become our King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry curator. So she's got a permanent job in the museum, and well deserved. But she basically went through the phone book, phoned up quite a lot of Hoopers, and found her son, Albert Hooper, who brought in lots more photographs, and there are some examples on the slide here and on our website as well. You can see a lot more examples. But she was, of her as a child entertainer, she was essentially Doncaster's answer to Shirley Temple.
Hooray! There's a line in the song that repeats itself at the end of every verse, which comes directly from her business card, I've just remembered. It's a pink card, is that right?
Yeah, and we've actually got it out so people can go and have a look at it during the interval.
On the kind of one side of it, it's got quotes, and one of the quotes from the business card is, "She completely won the hearts of all," and that's made it into the song. This is Miss Frida Hooper. Miss Hooper was a dancer. At 14 she heard the call to go fixing smiles on broken men at Hooton Pagnell Hall. She was clowning at the workhouse, entertaining South Parade. She completely won the hearts of all, and when the music played, it played, "Turn Frida, twist Frida, twirl once again. Won't you waltz with the ghosts of our ex-servicemen? Arabesque and the light shines, the hope of a new day. She's dancing the shadows away, dancing the shadows away." Miss Hooper's photograph arrived, tucked neatly in a tin, and they smoked all the tobacco, but kept her well safe within. Stopped a bullet on the front line, boys all took her on parade. She completely won the hearts of all, and when the music played, it played, "Turn Frida, twist Frida, twirl once again. Won't you waltz with the ghosts of our ex-servicemen? Arabesque and the light shines, the hope of a new day. She's dancing the shadows away, oh, dancing the shadows away." Miss Hooper was a teacher, and all the girls joined in, and they danced through the Great Depression till World War broke out again. She danced with the nobodies, sang the Kingsway Serenade. She completely won the hearts of all, and when the music played, "Turn Frida, twist Frida, twirl once again. Won't you waltz with the ghosts of our ex-servicemen? Arabesque and the light shines, the hope of a new day. She's dancing the shadows away, dancing the shadows. Turn Frida, twist Frida, twirl once again. Won't you waltz with the ghosts of our ex-servicemen? Arabesque and the light shines, the hope of a new day. She's dancing the shadows away, dancing the shadows away, dancing the shadows away.
Welcome back to the second half.
I don't know what it is. It's such a weird thing to do, but it does make it feel like a gig, doesn't it? Like there's a sort of awkward point, but if you slap your lumps of meat together and it's like, yeah, it's a gig. We all know what we're doing now. There's a gig that they do up north in Findhorn where they don't clap, and it's really weird because it's too aggressive, man. Your microphone's unplugged. Can I plug it in? All right, okay. Right, we're all plugged in. This song we're going to start with is the first one I wrote for the project. It's called Little Tommy Atkins, the Soldier's Son. And when we were in the museum, in fact, did you see Little Tommy Atkins, the Soldier's Son? They made 4 new cards for happy families, and put that in. and I thought, God, that's a wee bit dark. And so I made up this story about little Tommy Atkins from bits and bobs, like little bits of that film that we watched, the two films we mentioned earlier. The titles have eluded me. And then there was a story, Jude, about a guy who did he win a VC? And he became a professional soldier after World War One, and he had an accident cleaning out his gun. Who was? Could you tell us that story? Can you remember that?
Vicky, can you remember who that was? It was James Crampton. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So he was a. And I didn't realise that he was going to be in the song. Otherwise, I'd have done more of my homework.
I put him in
but
the
no,
end.
he was a local VC winner that was from Hexthorpe, and he had many years later. He went on to be, he carried on being in the army and died in, as Finn said, an accident cleaning out his gun. And it's one of those things where it's very difficult to know what actually happened and whether it was indeed suicide or not. And I think it just goes to show the impact that the war, the things that people had seen in the First World War, continued to have on people's lives. So while you've got that little Tommy Atkins being kind of exploited by games manufacturers for these patriotic purposes, you've also got, the impact that had on real people's lives and what lie behind the patriotism.
Yeah, I wrote a song for another project a few years ago with my friend Nick Turner, and one of the lines in it was about white feathers, and I've put in this song as well about white feathers. Don't know if you guys are aware of that if they saw men on the street, women would give the man a white feather, and that meant you're a coward, why aren't you going to fight? But they had no idea how old some of these boys were that they were giving white feathers to. And it's not their fault, but a lot of folk were sort of getting shamed into joining up when really they had no business being there. They were really young. My grandfather actually signed up early in World War II, but that's because he'd been distributing communist literature in the town of Wick, and he realised that if the Germans did cross the channel, he'd be first against the wall. So... so this was a very different thing. I think that white feathers thing was really, really scary, that kind of war mania. It's something that you could see how it would be possible to do that again, and I guess we kind of see it when we look to other countries where they do that. So... Little Tommy Atkins, the soldier's son, striding round the town with his wooden gun. Mother digs for victory, Daddy went to war. It'll all be over as soon as it begun. It'll all be over as soon as it begun. Little Tommy Atkins lied about his age. Didn't whatever Mother Atkins slapped him, flew into a rage. He didn't want a feather, he didn't like the school. Chaplain waved him off, lad, don't forget to pray. Chaplain waved him off, lad, don't forget to pray. Little Tommy Atkins marched 10 miles in the rain, pissing in your boots to help relieve the pain. Now he can point the rifle, bayonet the straw. Send him off to Flanders, back to board a train. Send him off to Flanders, back to board a train. Little Tommy Atkins gassed up the front line. Stop your crying, private, where's your effing spine? Bullet in the shoulder, shrapnel in his arse. Patched up and sent back to kill the Prussian swine. Patched up and sent back to kill the Prussian swine. Little Tommy Atkins, the soldier's son, shambles round the streets of his quiet English town. Mother doesn't say much, Daddy's in the ground. There's no jobs for heroes now the war is won. There's no job for heroes now the war is won. Poor old Tommy Atkins couldn't talk to anyone. Had a little accident cleaning out his gun. bullet blew his head off, herded down the street. Here lies Tommy Atkins, modern warfare's son. Here lies Tommy Atkins, modern warfare's son. For Tommy it was over as soon as it began. For Tommy it was over as soon as it began. Thank you.
I'm going to sing you quite a simple little song. Inspired by one of the silk postcards that I saw in the museum in Doncaster, and you might have seen there's some on the table. Have a look on your way out. So the First World War, inspired this beautiful art that were these silk postcards, beautifully embroidered postcards to be sent, quite often with words. And the one I took inspiration from has 3 violets in purple. Should know that because it's in the lyrics. And in the middle of the postcard, it just has stitched in, "I think of you." It's a lovely postcard. Thanks, Greg. This is called "I Think of You." Summer, the train leaves the station. I stand on the platform, his face in the midst of the steam that is billowing. The years fall away. Shelled and shrapnel, they are scraped, swabbed and sutured. They are patched up and parceled back to the front line. They are patched up and fed to machine gun lions. Single silk postcard, 3 violets in purple. I think of you. I will not admit that I watch for the telegram boy. I don't want to, but I do. Dream it is summer in the steam that is billowing. His face fades and the years fall away.
There's 60 other songwriters involved in this project. There's been various bodies involved, as we mentioned, the museums, but also Doncaster Arts and Doncaster Music Hub, 2 fantastic arts organisations, were involved and sent me into some schools, specifically Bentley and Bawtry, two primary schools, which I'm sure if you're local you'll know, two very different primary schools, and I went and did some songwriting with the kids, and we took the fantastic story of Vic the dog, and Vic the dog, this bloke went off to war who was called Bert, and he found, as a lot of soldiers did over there, he found a dog, and he called it Vic, and he made this dog his pet, his friend. But what the British Army in their infinite wisdom did to these dogs, when war was over and the blokes wanted to come back, the dogs couldn't. The dogs were all killed, and the kids particularly liked this story, I must tell you. And but Vic had a cunning plan. Sorry, Bert had a cunning plan. Vic was the dog. It's quite hard, this. So Bert had a cunning plan. So basically he put Vic in his rucksack, only a little dog, and there's a picture of him out there, or there will be at the end. Put him in his rucksack, and he went to get on the boat to get home, and the bloke was inspecting all of the rucksacks, and the bloke found Vic, and Bert gave him a sort of sympathetic look, and the searcher sort of just waved him on. So Vic made it onto the boat. Isn't this beautiful? And yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there was a rabies outbreak in Doncaster. No, so Vic had made it back to the UK. Congratulations, Bert. But he got on the train, and there was still no possibility that we got home. So as soon as he landed in the UK, he sent a letter to his mum, I believe, and said, "Can you get a little collar made that says Vic on it? And what's going to happen is I'm going to get off the train at Doncaster. I'll be dangling out of the window when we arrive. Don't be surprised. I'm going to hand you a dog. Can you very quickly put the collar on the dog, and when I walk out of the door, pretend that the dog's been here while I've been away." You're keeping up with this? This is a true story. You know, who needs to make up stories when there's things like this? Anyway, so he did. So he chucked the dog, past the dog, out the window. Mum put the collar on the dog, and then he walked off the train, and Vic made it home and lived a fairly long and happy life, I believe. And we've got, I mean, some of Bert's relatives, but let's be honest, Vic's the real hero. Are they in? Have we got?
Yeah, we've got. Is it okay to say? We've got Mrs. Isabel Sampson here, who is.
Oh, how lovely! Did you ever meet Vic? No.
Because Vic lived 16 years with the family in Wheatley, and of course he died before I was born.
Well, there you go.
But it wasn't a rucksack, you know.
Oh, what was it?
They didn't practice putting a little dog in a kit bag beforehand. So when he tried, what happened? The dog screamed and yipped and jumped, tried to jump the bag. That was no good. Now they wore great coats, great big ones. My father was a thin man with this great big army coat, you see, and so he put it inside on top of his chest and kept it there, and it stayed quiet. Apparently now Swan is only a little skinny dog, but with long legs. And when the official inspected them, this dog was safely in here on his chest, and as he walked back, for no reason at all, it stuck its head out. So my father agreed. And so he waited, and the official, just without changing his expression, said, "If anybody else sees that, I haven't." And he'd written to his parents before his leave was due and said, "Have a collar and lean tight and everything. Wait on the platform for the tube train. Whatever you do, wait for me, and I shall wait, and then you hand this up to the open window where I shall be waiting. Put the collar on the dog, and you've got the lead, and then I shall come straight out, and there's my mum and my sister, and
It's in the key of D. Can you play it as well? Alright. Yeah, so, and I not to try and distance myself from it, but yeah, so I went in. Bortrey wrote the first half, and Bentley wrote the second half. Every word is from the kids. The whole tune. The best thing about working with kids is you couldn't do this with adults. They do all the poetry bit. They got that fine, and you can just say to a kid, "Now sing that first line," and they'll just create a tune. And even more amazingly, the rest of the class will then go, just pick it up like, well, yeah, that's how it goes, isn't it? And you simply could not do any of that with adults. So this was written by 60 school kids. I have not changed anything about it. And if it's all right, we're going to teach you the chorus, because I've not really learnt it yet,
I was going to say, I think it's a great testament to the project, and Jude and everybody as well, that now 60 kids know the story of Bert and your family.
And it's going to be performed by, is it 500 kids?
500 of them are going to sing it. Yeah.
The Sing Out Project gig in the Dome in June.
Yeah, I went in schools with a fantastic, I don't know if I'm sure some local folkies will know, Janet Wood. She's an absolute marvel. To just complete, I was so enthused by working with Janet. Anyway, what a beautiful story. And the chorus goes like this. Are we ready? Bullets flying through the sky over massive man-made trenches. Soldiers dropping just like flies on the muddy ground they lie. You got that? You owe it to these 60 kids. You can do better than that. Come on. Here we go. Bullets flying through the sky over massive man-made trenches. Soldiers dropping just like flies on the muddy ground they lie.
Shall I do like hand gestures?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could do hand gestures.
Yeah, I'll probably lower the tone a bit. Bullets flying through the skies over massive man-made trenches. Will that help? Will that help, Primary 5?
Bert went on holiday and joined the army. Bert cheated to death through times. Bert got saved by Canadian soldiers. Bert had a dog called Vic. Bert walked miles with Vic in his rucksack. Metal skin saved his life. When Vic got home, he didn't like thunder because of the guns of war. Bullets flying through the sky over massive man-made trenches. Soldiers dropping just like flies on the muddy ground they lie. Shot in the jaw, laid in the trenches, tiger tanks rumbling past. When people saw him, they called him a gunner, gun screaming, striking pain. When Bert got home, he felt relieved, he felt safe at last. The memories of war, they faded away until thunder came again. Bullets flying through the skies over massive man-made trenches. Soldiers dropping just like flies on the muddy ground they lie. Bullets flying through the skies over massive man-made trenches. Soldiers dropping just like flies on the muddy ground they lie. Which is better than anything we wrote, so there we go. I must say we sort of skipped over Bert's story there because we focused on Vic. I promise you, Bert's story is even more remarkable, and there'll be some things out there, and I'm sure you'd be willing to recount some of it as well. So do have a look at that. I'll sing you another one. Back to things that we wrote. This is a song called God or Union, and I kind of am immediately drawn to conscientious objectors because, as I'm sure, like you all, the thought of war is hideous, really.
one of the things I always struggled with stories of conscientious objectors is that they were often rooted in faith. And now I am immensely jealous of people who have such faith. I am yet to find a higher being. To the extent, as I say, I'm really quite jealous of people who have that faith. And so I kind of always had this disconnect, really, with conscientious objectors. And then one of the things I was fascinated by was that as well as faith and God, which prevented people going to war, the unions played a large role, because why on earth would you want to pick a fight with your fellow man? And I kind of got that a bit more. But this was written about 5 men who were called.
So, in our exhibition about life on the home front, Keep the Home Fires Burning, that closed last year, we featured the stories of both absolutist conscientious objectors, so people who absolutely refused to go to war, and the notable Doncaster examples were John Hubert Brocklesby, who was actually from Conisbrough, Oswald Clark, who was a local Quaker, and then there was also another local Quaker called Harry Rhodes, who, while the other 2 were from quite middle-class backgrounds, he was from a much more working-class background. He worked on the railways and lived worked at the plant and lived at Hexthorpe. And his story really interested us, and we borrowed some material from his personal collection from the Liddell collection at the University of Leeds. And these 3 were all imprisoned for their beliefs, and Bert Brocklesby was actually sentenced to death in France, but that sentence was commuted and he was then imprisoned in Richmond Castle instead. And there's some fantastic graffiti that I think they don't let you go into the actual cells, but they've got lots of examples of that in their exhibitions there, which is really interesting. But then we also looked at the story of the people from those religious backgrounds who didn't want to go, didn't want to fight, but were prepared to help the war effort on the front line. So there were a couple of guys there, Walter Bone, and I've really forgotten the 5th name, but I can find it out and if anyone's interested. But the Quaker Ambulance Service played a massive role in looking after troops just behind the lines. And it's just a fantastic story of camaraderie, really, because you think of brothers in arms on the front line, but really what we found through looking at those that archival material was that camaraderie that the conscientious objectors gave to one another. And there was a wonderful birthday card that was sent from Oswald Clark, this notable local conscientious objector, to Harry Rhodes, the guy from Hexthorpe, with a chain of beautifully handmade paper men in there, and it was inscribed on it, "United we stand, divided we fall." And there was a bit of heather in there that was a symbol of luck and courage, to kind of keep their morale up as well, and what a lot of courage that would have taken at a time when, you know, the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate penalty for that was death.
I'll just talk you through a quick couple of lines very, very quickly. Talking about the process, it started off with "You 5 men." I wrote it about these 5 particular conscientious objectors, as Jude just mentioned, and I played it to Bella in the house, and she went, "Oh, that could be you fine men." So that was just like little things like that. And if there's the second line, "We'll make it so hard for you all that even those that they couldn't execute on some form of conscientious objecting, they did their best in every way to make life generally hell for those poor men." And including if they could get them to France somehow, they were easier to get rid of, because then if they objected, they could be accused of being absent without leave, and it was easier to deal with people like that. So it's called God or Union, and the chorus is, "With God or Union you stand, 'cause your front is in your own land." Twice. You fine men, we're
destroy you in any way we can. Try to walk from war, we'll make it so hard for you all. But with God, our union you stand, 'cause your front is in your own land. But with God, our union you stand, for your front is in your own land. The battered earth you walk upon, with hedgerows trampled and the flowers gone, with streams of blood and flowing men, a life of torment to the very end. But with God, our union you stand, 'cause your front is in your own land. But with God, our union you stand, for your front is in your own land. You can try to send the hurt away to France, where the laws might let you play. But there's more strength than flags and steel in us, in all this fight with a ball. But with God, our union you stand, 'cause your front is in your own land. But with God, our union you stand, for your front is in your own land. Anarchic and mischievous, workers, friends, and believers, with strength and ideology, not just anything to set yourself free. But with God, our union you stand, 'cause your front is in your own land. But with God, our union you stand, for your front is in your own land. For your front is in your own land. For your front is in your own land.
This is called Thou Shalt Not Kill. I'll do my best Free Presbyterian church minister bit here. This is the one that I mentioned earlier. I was really interested in this because, we were all told that we were to obey the 10 Commandments, and then suddenly everybody was like, nah, it's all right, it's fine. And not just everyone in this country, but everyone across the whole of Europe and then the whole of the world all of these Christian nations fighting each other and doing exactly what they said they wouldn't do. I thought it's kind of amazing, and I couldn't, like Bella mentioned earlier, it's really hard often with a song. It's like you kind of know what you want to write about, but you haven't got a way in, like a little door, like you don't have the seed that's going to grow the song. And I was listening to a podcast called This American Life, and it was called The 10 Commandments, and it had some really interesting stories about each commandment, but one of the best ones was an American Army, US Army chaplain explaining how he explains how to ignore the 6th commandment to soldiers that are about to go into combat, and how to get that kind of balance in people's heads, and also in some cases some people just won't do it, and saying, you know, well, you maybe don't have to, we can maybe find you another job that's not directly involved with the killing, and maybe that'll be okay. Which brought to mind an amazing story that I remember about someone who's a conscientious objector, and they said, I will not carry a gun, I will not kill anyone, however I'm totally happy to be a stretcher bearer. And so this guy, who at first was being laughed at by the other people in his regiment, they realised that he was going over the top, just like them, armed with nothing but 2 bits of wood and some canvas, and was carrying people off the field. And they were like, well, it takes guts to go over the top of a trench, but it takes even more guts to go over the top of the trench armed with nothing at all and wearing a Red Cross helmet. You're still going to get shot at. You still have to put up with the same things, and these guys were doing that. So yeah, this is kind of for them.
And it's our last song.
It is.
So, we've taken you on the full journey of Doncaster. In fact, nowhere near a full journey, because there was so much archive work, interesting stories, community projects, which so many of you here I know have been involved in. There's lots of you have come up and said hello at the interval, and that you were involved in collecting stories and all the rest at some point. So thank you to you guys for all of the song starting points, because you've made our lives absolutely marvellous. Yeah. And thank you to Jude and Neil for organising this for us, and for Cusworth Hall for having us here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you to you.
Also at the back of the room, we've got Joe Rusby making it sound like we know what we're doing, so please give it up for Joe over there.
And thanks to Bella, Finn and Greg as well for this amazing performance tonight, and for all of the interest and amazing things that they've brought out from our stories as well.
Welcome.
Who am I going to thank? I'm going to thank Wayne, who's been doing the projections, but he's also made a lot. You've made a film. You're making a film of this whole thing. Hi. We're on camera now. Clap. Can we just have a really loud clap from everyone, just to, yeah.
And I hadn't quite realised that Doncaster 1914 to 18 had got £1 million. We've not seen enough of that, as far as I'm concerned. There we go.
It's all gone to the community, I'm afraid. If tonight's gig is also part of the Doncaster Heritage Festival, which runs every year with lots of different types of events. We've put an evaluation form on your chair. If you can possibly spare a minute at the end to fill that in, that would be fantastic. And as a reward, not obviously a bribe, we've got some posters of the War and Peace project of tonight's gig that we'd like to give you for free in exchange for completing some evaluation. So if you hand that to one of our volunteers, Jill will be collecting those on the way out. That'd be great.
That's not an evaluation of the music. Please do not critique the music. We can't take it.
And we'll shut up after this, I promise. But we're taking this on a tiny tour in the start of June. 3 dates.
Doncaster!
Yeah, we're doing Doncaster, and so if you enjoyed it, or tell your pals, whatever. Doncaster, the cast on the 5th of June.
5th of June.
So yeah, we're doing this project is doing 4 dates, 2 of which are in Doncaster. If only the Spice Girls did such things. Am I right? Anyway, we'll leave you with this.
all for God and country, that's why we do this drill. How are they gonna square this? The book says thou shalt not kill. All for King and Kitchener, I wouldn't go of my own free will, 'cause no one asks about the sixth, 'cause it says thou shalt not kill. Well, I wouldn't lie and I wouldn't steal nor take my best friend's girl. Now they say it's fine for me to ignore thou shalt not kill. Both sides of the front line bow their heads and stand quite still. They worship the same God as us, yet we know thou shalt not kill. Well, I listened to the chaplain, and he said this is God's will, but I've seen it written in his book. It still says thou shalt not kill. I wouldn't lie and I wouldn't steal nor take my best friend's girl. So they say it's fine for me to ignore thou shalt not kill. That didn't finish when they said and there were more guts than glory, just men and mud and letters home while they covered up their story. Oh, the rich will just get richer while we fight to the bitter end. And after this is over, how will we all make amends? Well, I wouldn't lie and I wouldn't steal nor take my best friend's girl. Now they say it's fine for me to ignore thou shalt not kill. Oh, they lied to us, they stole our youth, they had quotas to fulfill. And I don't think it's right that they ignored thou shalt not kill. Oh, I wouldn't lie and I wouldn't steal nor take my best friend's girl. Now they say it's fine for me to ignore thou shalt not kill. Thank you.